So it's a $1 billion food program, national food program.
Correct. So I'm doing the work now of entering into these negotiations with the provincial ministers responsible, territorial ministers. And then they will determine what that looks like on the ground.
The Canada Child Care benefit drops into a lot of families' bank accounts.
As of today, the annual benefit for families that are receiving the maximum is $7,800 per child.
When we talk about childcare, $10 a day childcare, this national food program, the child care benefit, what guarantee do families have that these programs will remain in place if the Conservatives were to win the next election?
Every one of these programs, Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives have voted against.
There are a lot of Canadians who are upset, who feel angered, who don't like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau anymore. You're a minister in his cabinet.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think he should remain as leader of the Liberal Party?
I absolutely do.
But how do you get that message through to some Canadians who have just tuned out?
Through you.
Well, I mean, I'm going to ask the questions. Canada's Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Jenna Sudds, thanks so much for joining me here on The BG Show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, welcome to our fabulous studio.
It is fabulous. It's beautiful in here. I love it.
Well, you know, we're recording this on Friday, and it's a big day for a lot of families across the country.
Sure is.
Because the Canada Child Care benefit drops into a lot of families' bank accounts.
Sure does.
And it also, the amount that they get went up this year.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
So as of today, the annual benefit for families that are receiving the maximum is $7,800 per child.
Wow.
Under the age of 6, above the age of 6, it's $6,750. So it's increased by $350 or $295 respectively, depending on their age. And what, the power of this benefit, if I'm being candid, is families get it every single month. They know exactly how much they're getting. They know exactly which day it's arriving. It just provides families with certainty and that extra help because raising a family is very expensive, and especially in these times.
Yeah, to be transparent, I'm sure you hear it at the door a lot, or just talking with everyday Canadians. You know, times are tougher now. There's that, there's the affordability crisis, especially for young people who want to start who have chosen to start a family, and they're dealing with high home prices and higher mortgages because of interest rates and all those things. I mean, what do you say to those families who feel like things have gotten more difficult under, a Liberal government? Yeah,
well, I think it's fair to say that they have been challenging economic times since the pandemic. We've seen this throughout the world. Frankly, Canada is not alone in these struggles. The US, in Europe, we hear the same and we see the same metrics. The cost of living has gone up, inflation has been high, interest rates are high. We've seen some really positive movement here in Canada. We are the first G7 country to see interest rates cut. So we had our first cut a few months back, which is really positive for families, for Canadians to start to see that movement. We'll hear soon whether we'll get the next cut, fingers crossed. So, I talk to Canadians across this country and in my community every day who are struggling. I go to the grocery store, I see the increase in costs myself. So having said that, the Canada Child Benefit, as I've mentioned today, it increases, and this is a huge help for families. But I also look to programs like the $10 a day National Child Care Program. So I recall, my kids are older now, but when I had to get childcare, it was the equivalent of a second mortgage. Right. It was astronomical per child. So fast forward to today, here in Ontario, families are paying half of what they were paying prior to 2021. It will go down to $10 a day by 2026. And that savings currently is over $8,000 per child per family. Wow. It's meaning we see in the data that more women are returning to the workforce. So we're seeing more families have more, economic clout because they're able to get back into work. So these are powerful programs. On top of that, we're just rolling out our national school food program to be able to ensure that there's food in school available for children who are hungry. Just one more way, not only to set our kids up, obviously, for success, but to support families, one less thing to worry about. The dental program has rolled out and is benefiting thousands of children across the country. All of these pillars of support are measures that we've put in place as a government since 2015 to make sure that families have the support that they need.
I want to talk about this food program. So it's a $1 billion food program, national food program.
Correct.
And this is going to bring meals to schools to help kids who might not be able to get a meal at home. So does this mean every school across the country is going to have a meal program? Like, what does that look like?
Sure. So it is a national program.
Yeah.
It's $1 billion, and the funding will flow to the provinces, territories, and our Indigenous partners. So I'm doing the work now of entering into these negotiations with the provincial ministers responsible and territorial ministers. And then they will determine what that looks like on the ground. Having said that, we have put forward our national school food policy. Sounds very bureaucratic, but ultimately what this is setting out our vision. And our vision is a program that ensures that kids have access to healthy foods at school in an inclusive way with low barrier, that's culturally appropriate, that's healthy, that respects the food guide, that looks at integrating learning about our local food systems. It's very basic, but it's required to augment the level of funding that's been in place at the provincial level and to augment the work that so many non-for-profits and volunteers are trying to do at the grassroots level across the country.
But there's no guarantee that every student is going to be able to access a free meal.
Ultimately, that would be the goal, but I do think it's going to take time to get there. This is a provincial jurisdiction. These are provincial responsibilities. There are provincial programs in place.
And when you say that, just for our audience,
Sure.
watching and listening, it means that because education falls under the province,
Correct.
the federal government can't necessarily dictate how that's going to be distributed.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Just
yeah.
one, because some people,
Yes,
that's
sorry.
confusing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is confusing.
Yeah, because some
It
people
is.
don't realize what is under
Yeah.
a federal jurisdiction and
Yeah.
then what's under provincial. So
Absolutely.
hearing that, I think, will allow
Yeah.
people to understand who's responsible
Sure. Yeah.
if their child doesn't get.
Yeah. Well, I mean, similar to healthcare,
Right.
The federal government does not have jurisdiction.
Right.
We send funding to the provinces for them to implement our healthcare system. And it doesn't always go as well as we'd like.
So here in Ontario, when you send the money to Ontario for this food program, it's Doug Ford's government.
It is.
Right now who would
Correct.
determine which schools are going to get
Correct.
the money.
Correct. We got some work to do, right?
Well, I'm putting that clarity out there
Yeah.
because I think, what's also important to talk about is, you're under a liberal government. You're a liberal government.
Yeah.
He's a conservative government.
Yes.
And sometimes ideologically,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily
Always see
might
eye
see
to eye,
eye to
sure.
eye.
I have
Are you
to
nervous
think-
about that in terms of what that rollout might look like, especially here in Ontario?
Yeah. We're talking about food for kids.
Yeah.
Right?
But then at the same time, and we'll get to this in terms of childcare,
Yeah.
how that is deployed out also
Sure.
looks different. So
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
And I just hate to think that politics gets in the way of serving Canadians and serving kids. So in this circumstance, when we're talking about ensuring that kids who are hungry at school get food, let's focus on that.
Yeah.
Let's work collaboratively. Let's make sure that these dollars are spent well and they reach the kids who need it.
And under a perfect world for you, would this look like every child should be able to get food, or is it children who come from homes with,
No barrier. There
barrier.
cannot be stigma attached to accessing food. I've been able to visit some schools that already have programs in place. We've gone across the country and seen some really interesting models. I was in Nova Scotia not too long ago, and they had this incredible program. It was in a high school where there was a class where the kids did the cooking.
Yeah.
And then it was opened up at lunchtime. The kids lined up in the hall. Everybody could participate who wanted to participate, right? And I think ensuring that there's no barrier, that there's no stigma to getting that food is incredibly important. And in my conversations with these young people, they thought the same way. And it was really important to them that there was no barriers to access.
And why do you think we need a program like this in this country?
Well, I mean, the data shows that there are children going to school without food. We know we still have work to do with respect to continuing to ensure that we lift children out of poverty. The Canada Child Benefit is the one program that has been most instrumental in reducing our child poverty rate. But we also recognize, especially right now, with the cost of groceries, the cost of living having increased, we hear from families who are struggling. And it's the reality that there are some parents who aren't able to meet all of their children's basic needs. And so whether it's that scenario or whether it's just a busy family who didn't get a chance to go to the grocery store, I think we need to think about the impact that this has on kids and their ability to learn. Food is also very social. So when you are at school and it's lunchtime or snack time and you don't have a lunch or you don't have a snack, you're disengaging. You're missing out on those social opportunities with friends, to eat with friends. You think about us as adults, we go for meals with friends, we go to each other's houses and we share a meal. Like, these are important experiences. And it's important that kids have that opportunity and that they have the nutrition and the healthy food that they need in order to be successful, in order to be able to learn and to focus.
So the first year that this National Food Program is going to start is?
So we are negotiating agreements right now. That's the first step, right? And the biggest hurdle at this point in time, negotiate with the provinces and territories and Indigenous partners to get money to them. Once that is done, we are moving as fast as the provinces and territories will, right? So my aspiration is to get contracts, agreements signed as quickly as possible, hopefully some later this summer, so that the provinces can then put those wheels in motion and be ready to implement.
Do you think there could be any provinces ready to implement by September?
I think that there are provinces, so some are already have some form of a program, but I think there are provinces preparing to be able to augment that as quickly as they get the money to do so.
And which provinces have been the easiest to work with so far?
Well, not unsimilar to our experience with childcare, because with our early learning and childcare agreements, we are replicating that type of agreement model, 5-year agreements. Not unlike that circumstance where we saw BC, for example, was the first signatory.
So parents in BC, listen up. Your provincial government is working with the federal government. You could see food for your kids
there's some
in
great
schools pretty fast.
Yeah,
which are the provinces?
They're a great example. PEI is also a very great province to work with. My counterpart there, both on childcare as well as an interest in moving forward quickly on this school food program. And there's a lot of discussions underway with other provinces and territories as well.
Has it been difficult with Premier Doug Ford in Ontario? I mean, that's 40% of the population, right? So 40% of parents across this country who probably desperately need this, especially when you look at the affordability crisis, it's affecting Ontario families, probably some of the worst in this country.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say to that is, Premier Ford did do a cabinet shuffle not too long ago. The previous minister who's responsible for education now has other responsibilities, and Minister Todd Smith is the new minister. So, I have had a phone call with him. We've exchanged some correspondence with respect to the early learning and childcare. He's new in the file. I'll be meeting with him in person in the next few weeks, which I look forward to. But my conversations with him to date have been positive. I look forward to continuing to see that positive collaboration in all aspects of my responsibilities with Ontario. When it comes to the child care agreement that we have in place with Ontario, it hasn't always gone smoothly. I think that's fair to say. And undoubtedly, the provincial government has been slow to move forward with a funding formula that works for operators. And not to get too in the weeds, but this is the key piece right now. This is what is holding back our child care centers and operators from having certainty about their continuing of their operations, or even imagining the ability to expand and create more spaces, which is what we need. And so for me, that's the big piece that I need to see movement on with Ontario. And that is front and center, frankly, because until that happens, until they have a funding formula that is in place and that works, it is very difficult for operators to conceive of what the future looks like.
There has been some criticism about some of these programs, particularly from people who are like, these programs sound good. They come with a pretty hefty price tag. But as a parent, some parents say, I would have preferred to be able to feed my kids at home myself without the help from the government.
Sure.
But I just can't afford to do so because life has gotten so much tougher. So what do you say to people who feel like, this liberal government, living under the liberal government, has become tougher, and now we need more programs to make life easier? It seems weird.
Yeah, so what I would say to that is we've gone through a global pandemic, and it has completely changed so many aspects of not only how things feel and look in Canada, but around the world. But what I look to is, first of all, I'm really proud of the steps that we took as a Canadian government to get through the pandemic. I'm proud of the leadership that our Prime Minister showed and our Cabinet showed in ensuring that we move forward with supports for Canadians to get through that terrible time. And we did. And we are on the other side of it. And we are living through now, along with the rest of the world, this new world in which things are very expensive. And in order to, I'm going to say, gain control of this and to ensure that our economy continues to grow and that Canadians can keep pace and can afford the cost of living as we've seen the increases, as a government, we've had to make some choices. We've had to ensure that every dollar we spent is spent well, but we also had to ensure that we didn't further instigate inflation by spending too much. We needed to ensure that we safeguarded our AAA credit rating as a country. And I would suggest we're starting to see some really great indicators of the results of that work. We are the first G7 country to see interest rates decrease. This is a big deal. This is a really great sign, and it's indicative of our commitment and our leadership in ensuring that those fiscal parameters were in check and that we're heading in the right direction. So as much as, we can question, are the investments in childcare or a national school food program necessary? I think in this new world where we are, where we recognize that we've had this stubborn increase in the cost of living over the last number of years, as we work our way through these economic times, I think the policies that we've put forward and the supports that we've put forward for Canadian families were the right decisions and have helped so many families across this country not only stay afloat, but start to work to get ahead.
Which then kind of leads me to my next question then, because, when we talk about childcare, $10 a day childcare, this national food program, the childcare benefit, are these programs at risk? Let's say if the Conservatives were to come into power next year, Like, what guarantee do families have that these programs will remain in place if
Yeah.
the Conservatives were to win the next election?
Yeah. So this is what keeps me up at night, right? As the Minister for Families and Children, Social Development, this is the question, and this is, to me, what weighs on me. When I talk to families, when they share their struggles, when they share, the impact of the supports and the programs that we've been providing, the reality is that this could all be lost in a second. Every one of these programs, the Canada Child Benefit, the dental benefit, pharmacare, the National School Food Program, $10 a day childcare, Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives have voted against every single one of these. So imagine a world in which we are talking about families who are having a hard time making ends meet or getting ahead, where we see the cost of living has increased and these supports are taken away. And that is what is at risk. And, I feel for Canadian families. This is what I do every day as I think about how we can help them and how we can help them get ahead. And I just hope that they're paying attention. I hope they understand what is at risk, because that's not the Canada that I want to see for our future and for our children's future.
On the other side of things, though, some people say that these programs cost a lot of money. Taxes have gone up in certain areas, capital gains tax. It doesn't affect probably the people who rely on these programs, but people feel, the cost of living stuff. They hear about taxes going up, even if it might not affect them personally. It feels, the environment feels unstable. And, Pierre Poilievre has come out saying that he's, in his own words, is inheriting, a cluster F of a budget. And the reality is that we do have a large deficit, and a large part of that is paying for a lot of these programs. So what do you say to those money-conscious Canadians?
Yeah, so I'm one of them,
Yeah.
to be fair, and did study some of this in my past life and in my education. And first of all, I would point to the indicators, right? Point to the numbers. And Canada has the lowest GDP to debt ratio of the G7. And that is important. That's important for a lot of reasons. But it is important because it is a testament to our fiscal stewardship through this global pandemic, and now in these difficult times when we've had to put supports in place. So, the parameters speak for themselves. Our indicators, our financial indicators are good. We're starting to see interest rates go down. When I think about Pierre Poilievre and his rhetoric and all of his slogans, frankly, that mean nothing, what is he going to cut? So if he tells you he's going to axe the tax, what does that mean? Because if he's going to axe the tax, that means supports disappear. That means there is no $10 a day childcare. That means there is no dental program, right? Like, there are real tangible consequences for the rhetoric that he is putting out and the actions that he says he is going to take, that we need to internalize as Canadians what that translates to, what that means for us and for our families. And again, I suggest to you that's not the Canada that I want to live in and I want to raise a family in.
But how do you get that message through to some Canadians who have just tuned out?
Yeah, through you.
Well, I'm going to ask the questions. and we're going to post the interview. You know what I'm saying? We're going to post
It's
the
this.
interview.
It's having these conversations.
But the
right?
reality is, and I'm always frank,
Yeah.
with things. There are a lot of Canadians who are upset,
Sure.
who feel angered, who don't like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau anymore. Some people have said that they think that he shouldn't be leader going into the next election. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think he should remain as leader of the Liberal Party?
Well, as I've just shared, I mean, when you reflect on what we have accomplished as a government since 2015, including getting through this global pandemic with pretty strong indicators, leading in the G7 when it comes to not only interest rate cuts, but GDP to debt ratio, when it comes to putting forward incredible supports, these are under his leadership. And, I think it's important to reflect on those difficult times and how he led us as a country through those difficult times. And so, as...
But so did, we look down south, so did Joe Biden, and the conversation happening down south right now is that a lot of Democrats don't believe he should be leader for various reasons. And that conversation is happening. A lot of Canadians don't feel like Justin Trudeau should be leader anymore because of the fact that what polls are showing.
Sure.
And that there's just a lot of Canadians who have just tuned him out, unfortunately.
I have the opportunity, there's not many Canadians who have this opportunity, but I get to work alongside this man who, I have to tell you, there's no one that works harder than our Prime Minister.
Well, give us some of those insights, because we see what we see through either our phone screen or the TV screen.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels, for a lot of Canadians, it feels scripted.
Sure.
It feels a little bit manufactured.
Yeah.
But like you said, you get to work with him day in, day out on the personal side. And we know, this portfolio is super important to him. So what is he like on the inside?
Well, first of all, he's an incredible leader, as I've already said. But he's also just a regular guy. He's a dad. He's funny. He's humorous. He's just a normal person with an incredible responsibility and an incredible job leading our country. And no one is perfect. And I don't think we as Canadians can expect perfection from anyone, any of our leaders in any capacity, or ourselves, frankly. But I believe that he's there at a time when we need his leadership. We are still in expensive times. We are still struggling to get past this cost of living crisis. We still are working with a housing crisis, trying to get more homes built. There's so much great work in play right now. And, I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have the role that I have and to get to do the work that I do. And I believe that the Prime Minister is likewise doing the work that needs to be done, often thankless, but to get us out of these times and to get us ahead as a country.
So you're saying Canadians should give him another shot?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I appreciate you being candid. I know we're almost at time, so I do want to ask you one final question, especially for families out there who, with all of these supports, are still feeling the pressure. It's almost like the pressure is getting worse, like every day. And I don't mean to laugh, but it's at some point when the pressure is so high, all you can do is either laugh or cry. And that's what a lot of families are feeling right now. So, as minister responsible for that portfolio, what words of encouragement do you have for families out there who are just feeling like they can't see outside of this tunnel? Yeah, fair. Well, that's why I think today's announcement is really important. Increasing the Canada Child Benefit to keep pace with this increased cost of living is a really important measure to help families each and every month ensure that they have a bit of extra money to support raising a family, which we know is very expensive. It's demonstrative, I believe, of our commitment to continue to look for ways to ensure that people are supported. And we'll continue to do that, right? I encourage people to engage with their elected officials, to have dialogue about what those needs are and what they would like to see our government do. And you're talking about like writing into your office? Absolutely. And somebody's going to respond? Pardon me? And somebody's going to respond? Absolutely. All right. Well, we got to get it on record. My colleagues, I get the pleasure of working with some incredible people, but
they are also ordinary people who care tremendously about their communities. And, it keeps us up at night, frankly, when we know that there are people struggling. And I know my colleagues will continue to do anything that we can to help people when they need that help. So I think the dialogue is really important. It helps inform us in our decision making as we look at tools like the Canada Child Benefit, like early learning and childcare, things that really are tangible that can help alleviate some of those pressures for people.
All right. Mr. Sudds, thank you so much for your time, and
Pleasure.
Good luck on all those contract negotiations with all of those provinces and territories.
Thank you. Hopefully I don't need it, but I'll take it.
Alrighty. Hey, it's BG, and I want to know, what do you think about what you just watched? Make sure to drop your thoughts in the comments below, but also make sure to check out even more great content like this video and this video over here. And if you haven't subscribed to the Brandon Gona Show, do so right now by clicking this button right here.